Let's go. Come on in, let's go to where the pictures show, where the hero wins and the monster grins, and everybody knows that face up in those bright projector lights.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Also Starring. My name is Dan.
And I'm Morgan.
And today we are talking about Last of the Mohicans, starring Daniel Day-Lewis as Hawkeye, Madeline Stowe as Cora Monroe, Steve Waddington as Major Duncan Hayward, and also starring Wes Studi as Magua, who we talked about last time on our episode of Street Fighter. If you haven't watched that one, you should check it out. It's a pretty fun episode. Last of the Mohicans came out in 1992. It was directed by Michale Mann, whose most beloved work includes Heat, Collateral, and The Insider, as well as the TV show Miami Vice and the not so beloved movie version of it. It was based on an 1826 novel by James Fenimore Cooper, but mostly inspired by the 1936 Randolph Scott film adaptation. I was thinking about a plot synopsis, and I came up with like the most simplistic version of it that I could think of, which is some people go to a fort, the fort is attacked, then they leave the fort.
Yeah. Okay.
But the real synopsis is it is set during the French and Indian War of the 1750s. Last of the Mohicans is a highly experiential action-adventure film with a period setting and a strong romance element at its core. When a battalion of British soldiers falls under the attack of a Huron war party, the survivors, one British officer and two civilian daughters of a British colonel, are aided by three Mohican hunters who help them to reach Fort William Henry. They arrive to find the fort and the girl's father is besieged by French troops. As tensions among the fort's inhabitants rise over the colonial militia's conflicting responsibilities to both their families on the frontier and the British military, a powerful romance begins between one of the daughters, Cora Monroe, played by Madeline Stowe, and the Mohicans' half-white adopted son, Hawkeye, played by Daniel Day-Lewis. The British and French armies negotiate a shaky parley, and our heroes begin their journey home, only to once again fall under the pursuit of the same Huron warrior, Magua, played by Wes Studi, who has revealed a personal vendetta against Monroe, his daughters, and anyone who gets in the way.
That was a pretty good unpacking. I think this movie is pretty complicated in terms of story. It's not super straightforward. There's a lot of layers to it.
I mean, it's got a pretty straight, like, linear narrative that's like only takes place over like a few days or something, but there's so much shit going on like around that story that it's a lot.
A lot of the things that they show in this movie look very period accurate, and even some of the events that take place in this, white people mixing with Native Americans on the border, Native Americans adopting white children after raids or trades or what have you, I guess was actually something that did happen too.
That was something I thought was kind of like a hand wavy thing to just like, oh, this is why we have a white actor as our hero, but listening to Michale Mann talk about like giving it the context of like at this time the mortality rate was so high because of the disease that the Europeans brought over, like that's why the natives would just like adopt any child of someone that they like conquered or they came across or something. They would just adopt them as their own so that their like people would go on.
I mean, on its face, it sort of looks like Daniel Day-Lewis is playing a Native American, and it's kind of like, whoa, what is this? But
people have that misconception. I talked to some people who were like, yeah, I mean, it was kind of funny that they got Daniel Day-Lewis to play a Native American. I'm like, yeah, but he's not.
I think it's a little bit, his clothing and his long hair and his like tan or whatever you want to call it is like not exactly Native American looking, but it's like close enough to where you're thinking, is he trying to?
Well, the idea is that he basically is. I mean, like,
right.
He says even in the movies, like, I wasn't but 1 or 2 years old when my parents died,
Yeah.
and Chingachgook adopted me. So it's like he is essentially like totally Mohican. Like he was raised in their ways, and like Chingachgook is his father totally, and like Uncas is his brother totally, as far as he's concerned, and as far as they're concerned, like he's one of them.
Their speaking roles are limited in the movie, and they
Yeah.
only speak in their tongue or whatever when they speak to each other, and there's
Yeah.
no English from them, so they're kind of sidelined a little bit. I did notice that on the
That's-
second watch, that they're kind of not there very much.
Well, he speaks English. He speaks English.
Oh, he does? Okay.
Yeah, he has lines in English.
There's so few that I didn't even pick that up, actually. Okay.
That's my one major complaint, I think. That's my only real complaint, honestly, about the movie, is like, if like we always do that thing at the end of, if you could change something, what would you change? And I'll just say it right now. It's like, I would give them bigger parts. Apparently there was a 3-hour version of this movie, and he cut it
feels
down
like that
to
yeah.
like an hour, or what is it, like 112 minutes or something like that.
Is it all? It's less than 2 hours. Wow.
An hour and 52 minutes. Yeah, when it was originally released. So like there was originally a lot more.
It's also a little bit confusing when we meet everybody, because it's in the heat of battle, and there's a warrior named Magua, and he has gained favor with the British, and he's giving them advice about where to go to this fort. And so the commander takes the advice and says, okay, send my daughters and send my troops to this fort, only to get jumped by Magua's, Huron forces. And then that's when Daniel Day-Lewis and everybody comes in and saves them. And that's how they end up meeting up. He asks him basically like, how do you go west? Is that what he says?
He's like, we're in the middle of a war. How is it that you are heading west? And he says, well, we just face north and real subtle like turn left.
Yeah. It's like the delivery is so good. I was like, yes, that's kick ass.
Daniel Day-Lewis has got some great lines in this movie. And it's always between him and Major, what's his name? Duncan Hayward. The house that they stumble upon is the same people that you meet in the very beginning. Like
Right.
before any of this stuff with Magua happens, Hawkeye and Chingachgook and Uncas, they're hunting a buck. They kill it. They take it to this house, this cottage or whatever you call it, cabin.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like dinner with this family of settlers. And then later, after the three Mohicans rescue the Monroe daughters and the major that they're friends with, they stumble back, probably go back there, seeking shelter or something or help, and they find the house is all burnt out and everyone's been murdered, and it's evidence of a war party that's come through there, because they say that it wasn't thieves because they didn't take anything, they just killed everybody and burned the place.
Right.
Then that comes up later because the militia, the colonial militia, has only agreed to join the British Army under the agreement that if their homes, the frontier homes, come under attack, that they'll be able to leave and go protect their families.
Cora is adamant that they have a Christian burial. He says no, because that will alert others that may be coming through this way that somebody's been there, and that they'll find them that way. And so he's pretty smart, the way that he covers his tracks, and knows that other people will pick up on what's going on. So she finally comes around and realizes like, oh, this guy's no dumbass. Like he's pretty cool. That's where like the romance a little bit turns up for her. And then they have a scene where they talk under the stars, and he kind of explains where he came from and what his life is like. And she's like, okay, that's interesting. But it doesn't really come to a head until when they get to the fort. I got to talk a little bit about the canoe appearances in this movie, because I feel like they have random access to canoes whenever they need them. And it's pretty funny because they just appear, and then all of a sudden they're in a canoe, and then they just ditch them. And then later on they're like, oh yeah, I need another canoe. And then they're just in them again. And it's just like,
I don't really
where
think
the hell?
about that.
Yeah.
When they get to the fort, which is where they're heading this whole time, because that's where the girl's father is, Colonel Monroe. Yeah, it's totally besieged by the French, which they're not expecting at all.
Right.
They're digging trenches.
They're 200 meters out, and they're doing 30 yards a day. So they have 3 days, and or they do the math for you in the movie. but they have 3 days in order to get all the troops out of there or just die, basically.
I like that moment too. It's a small moment, but it's funny because it's like the colonel knows all the data, but like he needs the major to do the math for him. He's like, so if they'll be here in 3 days, and he's like, damn, like he couldn't have figured that out on his own.
Yeah, he's like, hold up, damn.
I love that actor. We got to say, I mean, all the actors are really good in this movie.
Yep,
fucking phenomenal.
This movie
across
is
the board.
Fucking awesome.
We should say
I'm always gonna critique little things I don't like about it or whatever, but all in all, this movie kicks fucking ass.
I think we were both really excited to do this one.
Yeah, I definitely was. I this is probably the most excited I've been to do a movie yet. Just because after I watched it a couple of times, I was just like, I kind of want to watch it again.
Me too. It keeps getting better like every time I watch it, and the more I learn about it.
I think there's a ton of history. They tried to be as true as they could to the history. I'm sure there's people out there nitpicking it, but so the cannons are already shooting at the fort and blasting it to pieces. But when they get the mortars up there, they're going to be able to just basically shoot fire over the top of the wall and just burn everyone alive. So they're like, okay, what are we gonna do?
They realize that because of Magua, intercepting communications, that the British reinforcements are a lot closer than they realized. So they could send a man out and have reinforcements in a day and a half. So then there's this cool scene where, they send this guy out and
he's providing cover for the guy to sprint through the woods so he can get away and go get these other soldiers.
Yeah.
And then as they come out one by one, it's like this epic music. And, they have this thing called a Pennsylvania flintlock musket. And it's like, I did a little bit of research on this movie. Apparently that's regarded as one of the most beautiful rifles ever made or something like that. And so it's just like these epic scenes of him like long haired, like these huge rifles and then this music, and he's just like slow motion with like the flame flickering in his face, and he's just like killing people so that this guy can get away. But the whole reason that he's letting this guy get away is because he's like helping the militia guys that were in the fort as well, which is a plot point because the militia is like, hey, we heard from Hawkeye that our family is in trouble because they saw this cabin get burned out and we would like to leave. And that was the stipulations that the colonel put at the beginning of the movie. He's like, look, if your houses are in trouble, we're going to let you disband the militia. Yeah. You guys can go back. So when that actually comes to happen, he's like, oh, you guys got to stay here. You got to stay here. Gonna work. You can't leave.
It's a great scene because you can tell that it's the British are being duplicitous and that they're just trying to cover their own ass because they know if they let the militia go that just weakens them even more.
It's the seeds of the revolution, right?
Yeah, that scene is fucking beautiful. There's that one shot that's like the panoramic shot of the room, and it's like it's the fucking birth of the American Revolution, like right there. But it's also these great character moments because Colonel Monroe is hearing from Hawkeye, Daniel Day-Lewis's character, what he's saying about this cabin that they found that was all burned out and everyone was murdered. And he's saying it was a war party, which means they're going to be attacking the entire frontier. And Colonel Monroe asks Major Hayward, who's like a little bit of backstory. He's in love with Cora Monroe, and like there's a whole unrequited love thing between them.
She rejects him at the beginning of the movie.
She rejects him at the beginning. But Colonel Monroe asks him, he's like, can you corroborate what Hawkeye's saying? It's a great moment because Cora's in the corner of the room and she's watching him to see what he's going to do. And he like looks at her for a second and he's like thinking about it, what he's going to say. Cause he knows.
He's like, am I going to throw this guy to the bus so I can like have another shot at this? Cause he knows that there's something going on.
Not only that, but also like he has an obligation to his king and like the fucking British military.
Sorta, but it's mostly because he's like, fuck this guy, right? Like he's like, oh,
he's stealing my girl.
Yeah. I mean,
there's a few layers to it.
Maybe some duty, but mostly it's like, fuck this guy. Yeah.
I think it's also duty. I really do. But
well, it's like, interesting that you bring that up because
it's both.
I did watch the 1936 version of this movie for as long as I could stand it because it's extremely racist, and there's like
Oh man,
fuckload of like face white people painted like with. It's hard to watch.
No.
So,
oh no, I was hoping to hear better than that.
no. It's like straight. They have a scene at the beginning of that movie with a bunch of exposition because they're actually in England at the beginning of that movie, and it's all about the king sending Duncan to your point, the duty side of things, like, oh, can you like go to the colonies? Because remember, most of the battling is going on in Europe between the French and the English. There's this colony over here that's also having problems, but they're like, look, that's like small potatoes compared to what's going on over here. Why would we send anybody? And he's like, look, just go over there and like take care of it. Like just handle it. He's like, okay. So in that respect, you're totally on. From the original source material, he's like, I'm doing this because my king asked me to go do this. But in this movie, there's no scene where there's a king or anything like that that commands Duncan to do this. And so there's not that.
I'm basing my interpretation of this moment off of more than just the scene. I'm also basing it off of like some other things that he does in the movie. Like, we'll get to the parlay scene in a little bit.
Oh yeah, parlay is great.
Possibly my favorite scene in the whole movie.
It's pretty
like,
sweet.
When he says the line of like, I know our men and I know they would rather like die than surrender. It's like, okay, this is a guy who's like, he's bought the whole, like, he believes in all the bullshit. Like he's 100% invested in
Kool-Aid
like,
drink. Yep.
Yeah.
2 spoons of sugar.
I think in this moment, yeah, he is like, fuck Hawkeye, but he's also like, well, the colonel needs me to lie right now so that we can prevent the militia from leaving. So he lies and he says, I didn't see anything that would lead me to believe that it was anything other than thieves.
Yeah, but he's also like, fuck this guy.
Yeah, he is. Totally. You're right. He totally is.
Because later on, he confronts Cora and is like, you like him, huh? And then she's like,
yeah.
What does I do?
He's like accuses her of being infatuated with him. But so there's this great moment right there. It's just like, it's defining characters, like it's defining Hawkeye and what he believes in and the truth that he stands for and his allegiance to the people that he's connected with. And it's defining Colonel Monroe and like his obligations to the military. And it's defining Cora and her like transitioning from like probably her very like wealthy upbringing in like Boston and London and like having this idea about the world that is just being totally torn asunder by this new reality of what's going on in front of her, and realizing that her actual beliefs like align more with Hawkeye and this guy that she grew up with. I think they've like apparently known each other since they were children, this Major Hayward, who's revealing himself as like a liar and just kind of a dick. It's just a really great moment where it's just like all these character threads and all these thematic threads are just like laid out for you. And it's just a really great fucking scene.
I agree. As all this stuff is going on, like the French are getting closer and closer to the fort.
Yeah.
We get to the point where things are kind of looking pretty bad. They have the guy that got out and he's going to get the troops or whatever. So there's maybe hope on the horizon, but the shells are still coming in. They lock up Hawkeye and he's like in the cell, and then he like knows what's coming. He's like, look, this shit's about to get crazy. When that happens, like they have honor amongst soldiers during this time, right? So
yeah,
if they see a high-ranking soldier, they're not going to kill him. So go with your dad. And she has this line. She's like, "I will find you," and it foreshadows this like super epic line that comes later. Yeah. And I didn't catch that the first watch through, so I was very excited when I saw it the second time, and I was like, "Oh, that's so badass!" Like she says it to him first, because later on, he has this epic line where he says it back to her. And they're in another hairy situation. It's just like kind of shitty situation after shitty situation for these people, right? Like there's no real like lull in anything. There's a slight lull when they first get to the fort, but then after that it's just like run, get attacked, run, get attacked, figure out how to get away, run, over. Like you mentioned, the parlay scene, which I think, like,
let's get into it.
It totally blew my mind because I was not expecting it to go down that way, and and when it did, I was like, "What? That's crazy!"
It's so unusual.
It's very unusual.
It's so refreshing to see, like, especially in a movie that's like a war movie, to see a surrender portrayed so well. And like,
Yeah, my notes say that the Marquis, who's the French commander, he offers excellent surrender terms, and
yeah, he does.
He basically says, "You guys won't go to prison. They can leave with all their rifles, and all they have to do is go back to England. As long as they don't stay here, like we'll never deal. We won't hurt them."
Yeah, no, it's a great scene, and like the actor Maurice Roves, who plays Colonel Monroe, I think that's his best scene, because he's the one who's forced. He's the one who's forced to make the decision to surrender, and you could feel how uncomfortable it makes him. They try to reject the surrender like a couple of times, and the French General Marquis, he's like, please, like, just listen to my terms. Like, you don't have to, like, don't sign the death warrant of all your men. And the line that Monroe has as he's looking back at the fort, and it's like he can see all his people watching him, probably like praying that like they're not going to die. And he says, death and honor are thought to be the same, but today I've learned that sometimes they are not. Just such a great moment.
Yeah, it's really good. I love it too, and that line is fantastic. Also, Magua is with the French, and he's pissed.
Yeah,
right?
He's not happy about the surrender terms. Then this is the thing that I am like, I don't necessarily like, but it's like another layer. Do you think that because there's a meeting between the French general and Magua, do you think that he's saying subtly, I'm going to accept his surrender, but then you can do whatever you want?
100%.
Like,
yeah.
Okay,
They kind of move on, and as they're marching out, they lead you to believe like everything's kind of going to be okay, and they're going to go to the next fort, meet up with the troops, and they get jumped by the Hurons that are waiting in the forest. And it's kind of a weird scene how it starts out, because first they send out one guy, and he like kills somebody, but
with a tomahawk,
nobody like sounds the alarm, and so I guess a guy died, but they just don't do anything, and everyone's kind of looking around like bewildered. But their reaction wasn't like it was like
well, he might have attacked a section of the line where it was like people who didn't know what to do.
I've seen enough of these movies. They're supposed to go. They're not supposed to just do nothing. Daniel Day-Lewis like comes to arms like quicker than most, and then he's like, "All right, I'm ready to fuck shit up or whatever."
I actually rewound it because I was like, "Wait, how does he get free?" Because he's in shackles.
Good question.
And it's just like they just cut to dead.
Did he have a canoe?
Yeah, probably. He picked the lock with a canoe. No, they just cut straight to dead redcoat soldier on the ground, and like him dumping the shackles on top of his body. Like he's just like, well, the guy's dead. I mean, they definitely cut a lot of stuff out of this movie, and there's
this is the old days where you had the film that you had to cut out and stuff too, right? So you're like, is this the right scene?
There's some interesting questions to be had about like not only what led to the cut that was originally released in theaters, but then what led to like
release the man cut. Let's start it.
Well, there's already 3 of them. Like that's the thing.
Never mind. Stand down.
No, he cut it way down, and then there have been like 3 other versions since then.
I want to watch the other versions. Wait, they're not available on streaming? There was no like theatrical or director's cut or whatever.
Okay, so there's
lay it on me, big boy.
I don't remember the names of all of them, but whatever version that you watch that's on streaming that I have on Blu-ray, that is like the ultimate director's cut. Like every version is Michael Mann's
that was it?
Update of it. Yeah, it's like he's kind of like George Lucasing it a little bit.
Well, film is never finished, right? It's just abandoned. I heard that somewhere this weekend, and I was like, that's lame.
The thing that I think happened, because I remember when we watched it when we lived together in college, the version that we got on disc from Netflix back when we used to get DVDs in the mail from Netflix.
I recall. Yeah.
We watched it, and that version was one of the, not the theatrical, but one of the early director's cut versions, and they cut out all of Daniel Day-Lewis's badass lines.
What?
I remember watching it with you and being like, fuck this. Like being like really pissed off.
Yeah, don't cut him. Like of all things, like that's the wrong choice. Glad they fixed that.
So then he put him back in, but there's still one that's not in there. But this is my theory about what happened. He made this movie. It was like 3 hours long, and then the studio wanted a shorter version. That's my guess. Like, they wanted a more like digestible movie. They didn't want another Dances with Wolves, which Dances with Wolves
it's typically
come out
rating,
like,
right? Like they cut it to get a certain rating because they don't want. Was
Yeah.
this PG-13? I think it was, right?
also runtime plays a factor, because like if you can get it under 2 hours, then you can
Sell
play
more
it
tickets.
more times, sell more tickets, get more
Yep.
butts and seats.
Get butts and seats. Yep.
So they didn't want to do, or maybe they just knew that like the long cut didn't stack up to like Dances with Wolves, so they were like, all right, well, if we cut this down, we make it into a more like digestible, Roger Ebert called it like a matinee fantasy or something like that. It'd be more accessible.
This is
than
probably
Dances
one of
with
the
Wolves.
best like Sunday afternoon movies you could ever like put on. Like
Totally.
if it's like Sunday afternoon and you got nothing to do and you throw this on, you're just gonna have a good time. You're just gonna have a good time.
And I wouldn't say that it's quite the achievement that Dances with Wolves is, but
No.
I'd say that it is like in a different way. But this is what my theory is of the subsequent cuts is I think that Michale Mann was upset that his movie wasn't taken as seriously at first, which was evident in the Roger Ebert review and my recollection of how it was received when it came out, that it was sort of like, oh, it's kind of fluffy, whatever.
It's just it
really isn't. Like, it's an action romance. It's kind of silly. But like,
yeah, but it's
all the nuance that we've been talking about, like, it's all clearly more than that.
The costumes, the period accurate, hairstyles and everything.
There's so much behind the scenes stuff we haven't talked about. But like,
Daniel Day-Lewis spent like 8 months in the woods to get prepared for this movie because he's one of those like gotta be method, and it fucking worked.
It shows.
Yeah,
it shows,
really
he's
good.
like, you would never think of him as that guy. Like, he was in My Left Foot before this movie, and like even any of the other movies he's ever been, I would never think of him as like, wilderness man. But
No.
he totally is believable.
Yep.
Because of his commitment to it, which is like, just a side note, it's like, fuck you, Jared Leto, and your half-assed idea of what method acting is. Like, this is the real
What
deal.
did Jared Leto do?
For his fucking Joker move, like his Joker.
No, that was not good. What did he do? Did he go become an LA gay?
You haven't heard about this? No.
No.
He sent like used condoms and like dead rats and shit to like the cast members because it's like edgy and like.
That's not funny. That's weird.
It's fucking weird, right? He only let people refer to him as Mr. J, and he like stayed in character the whole time. It's just like,
can you imagine being around that character for like more than 10 minutes? I'd be like, get the fuck away from me.
From a like, I'm
like,
sorry,
bro,
but
your
like,
character kind of
not
sucks.
not a great actor either. Like, I don't care that he won an Academy Award. Like,
He's good in the Dallas Buyers Club. I liked him.
Yeah, he's all right.
I'm looking forward to Morbius. I think we talked about it a couple episodes ago, but I think it's going to be good.
All right. We're tangenting
Morbius,
hard
the living
Morbius.
vampire.
How do we get from Last of the Mohicans to Morbius? Anyway.
That's what this show's all about, bro, is jumping from movie to movie in a way that you will never predict. Yeah.
That is actually what the show's all about.
Yeah,
but
so staying on point.
Where was I going with this? In addition to his like method acting, is like 6 months preparation as like a survivalist. Like, they also built all these sets, the forts,
Yes.
the cabins, the costumes, everything they made from like material that would have been used at the time. Like, it's all 100% as authentic as they could make it, which is fucking cool. And clearly, like, it helped with like the cinematography, and it helped with the actors' performances and all that stuff. Like, there was great care taken with this movie. And if you listen to Michale Mann's commentary, like, it's literally like listening to a history professor just talk about the time period.
I gotta watch that. That sounds so awesome.
He talks about the movie, but it's like hardly at all. Like, he's like, oh yeah, and in this scene, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so what was happening at the time between like the Iroquois and like da-da-da-da-da, it's like, dude knows his shit, and he was really like passionate about making this a serious movie about the time, and it shows. But my theory is that it didn't show in the theatrical cut as much, and he made subtle adjustments. He took out all the like good one-liners because he was like, oh, this isn't serious enough, and then he realized, no, it's not as good without him.
Yeah.
Put him back in.
Put the funny stuff back in.
I think he made very subtle editing adjustments, maybe different line readings and stuff like that. Honestly, I'm curious if this version that we just watched is actually better, like is actually a more kind of serious film than the one that originally came out.
I don't know. I don't really love director's cuts all the time. Like, they don't always make the movie better, but there's sometimes when I do watch them and they're typically longer because it's usually, like you said, like runtime and violence and stuff like that.
This one is 2 minutes longer than the theatrical
So it's not
cut.
very much, right?
It's not about adding stuff back in. I think it's about picking different takes, maybe picking different shots, and slight editing adjustments.
My theory
to
is
flow.
that it's layered and you have to watch it multiple times in order to absorb it.
It could be that too.
But, you know, one thing that we kind of gloss over sometimes in these is what else came out around the same time. Because another movie that ended up winning Best Picture was Unforgiven, that came out in 92 on Christmas Day. And I think we've mentioned it here before. And that movie, like, front to back, is my favorite Western, like, ever. And so it's just, to have multiple period piece movies, it may have been oversaturated at the time. I believe 1492 Conquest of Paradise had also come out too. So there was probably a lot of movies that were doing period stuff. And every big director, with like Clint Eastwood's doing it. You have Ridley Scott doing 1482. And you have Michale Mann doing Last of the Mohicans. It's possible that we just oversaturated the market with period pieces.
I think it's true, but there's also the fact that, like...
True. Did you just see how I pulled all that knowledge out of my brain from early 90s movies? That was impressive.
That's impressive.
Well, that was crazy. How did I remember all that? Why do I remember all that?
I think it's totally fair that Unforgiven swept the Oscars that year, but I do not think it's at all fair that the only fucking thing this movie was nominated for was, like, Best Sound.
That is pretty travesty. Yeah.
Give me a fucking break.
Yeah, the sound is really good, but it's that's really not even score?
No, and the score one, that's fucked up. The score one, I think I can explain why it wasn't. I think it was eliminated from the competition because it's more than one composer. Because when they cut it down from 3 hours to an hour and 52 minutes, they had to, like, rework some of the score, and the guy who did all the, like, most memorable parts of it wasn't available anymore, so they hired a different guy to do, like, 4 pieces for it.
Oh, okay.
So maybe that explains that, but, like, West Studi not getting nominated for, like, Best Supporting.
What about the cinematography?
I think the cinematography, honestly think, like, if not Best Picture, like, Best Director. And I get why Daniel Day-Lewis wasn't nominated, because he won the year before for My Left Foot. He wasn't nominated
at all. Wow. Okay, that blows my mind.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, it wasn't nominated for anything except sound, which is just like, come the fuck on. Like, this is what I mean when I say I think the movie wasn't taken as seriously at the time. I think for whatever reason, like, maybe you're saying oversaturation, but I also think, like, it's a heavy, like, action adventure romance as well as being, like, a period piece. So it's like, I could see people at the time just being like, well, it's kind of a fluff movie, isn't it? Like, at the end of the day,
I would call, like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, like an action adventure romance movie. I would not call this movie an action adventure romance movie. I wouldn't even call this an action movie. There's action in it, but it's definitely a drama and a period piece. Like, to me,
that's where I wonder about where the different cuts come in, because my memory of it as a kid was like, oh man, this fucking movie's badass. Like, he throws that blue axe sword thing.
Oh yeah, their weapons are weird. Yeah.
Like, it kills the guy. I mean, like, it's got some, like, pretty, like, action adventure-y moments.
Okay, fair. I mean, Michale Mann is definitely known, like, he is probably one of the most famous action scenes in cinema history, right? Like, as the bank robbery scene. So, like, for him to not call this, like, action, you're right. I'm wrong. There's definitely an action, like, element to it, but it's not like Die Hard. It's not like, you know, Terminator 2 or something like that. It's way different. It's flintlock action.
There are intimate action scenes, but then there's also, like, the chaotic battles where it's like a whole bunch of fucking Indians, like, hatcheting people. Like, that stuff's, like, scary.
So we were just about to talk about,
it's not,
like,
really exciting.
Magua killing the colonel, who he calls gray hair in the movie.
The gray hair, yeah.
So he gets him during this ambush scene that we talked about 35 hours ago, and he has him down on the ground, and he just fucking rips his heart out, cuts his heart out, because he says to the French guy, he's like, I'm going to eat his heart. Like, that's how much he hates him. And you're like, damn, that's fucking hate.
Yeah.
And then, like, as soon as he kills him, he's like, where are those chicks? Where are his daughters? And then, like, Daniel Day-Lewis is like, shit, I better go save him real quick. So, anyway, they get out of that situation.
That's where the one line that they cut out and didn't put back in comes in, because they're in the canoe, and then they see Duncan and the other...
come from?
Where'd that canoe come from?
Where'd that canoe
That should have been a line where he's like, where'd this canoe come from?
He's like, did you bring this with you in the battle? It's like, no, I didn't. Oh, okay.
I thought you
brought it. I mean, they're not small canoes either. They're like 12-man canoes, so they're like fucking huge. Canoes.
But there is a line that hasn't been put back where they're in the canoe and they look over and there's another canoe and Duncan's in that one and he's got his musket drawn.
You guys brought a canoe too.
Yeah, but he's pointing his gun at Hawkeye again. Daniel Day-Lewis says, like, haven't you got anything better to do on the river this morning, Major? Instead of, like, shoot me, basically, is what he's saying.
Yeah, there's still a little bit of tension between them.
Yeah, so they're still at
this
odds.
point, Daniel Day-Lewis and Cora have, like, you know, been intimate with each other. And so they're like...
They banged at the fort.
This weird ginger is like hanging out with us, and we don't really like him, but whatever. We gotta like continue on our journey or whatever. So
the incel is tagging along.
They get to this waterfall, and then they duck behind it, and it's got these like if you're a kid and you're watching it, you're like, this is so cool. Like this like cool like series of caves and like places where they can walk and hang out, and so. That's what I'm
saying. It's an adventure story in a way. It's got these like cool moments in it. Anyway,
Daniel Day-Lewis, as we've been saying all along, he's like got wicked street smart. So he's like, look, if those guys are coming here, like what I need to do is just bail, and then you guys get captured, and I'll like come and get you.
Yeah.
And so then he repeats the line that she said to him, and he's like, whatever you do, you stay alive, and then I will find you. And like it's just so good. And then he like fucking just dives out of the waterfall and like somehow survives, and I don't know, it's just really good. I love that part. We gotta talk about the next scene though, because this is my least favorite part of the movie. He basically bails, they get captured, they take them back to the village, and within I would say a minute film time, like Daniel Day-Lewis is already coming back to the village, like going like, okay, I found you. And so it's just like, you didn't have to try very hard, did you? It's just you just
told you,
like, okay, well, now I'm back, I found you. And then he does, I mean, this not to take away from the whole like negotiation scene, because I think that that's really good, but like the time is way too short. Like he should have struggled a little bit. They have this nice scene with the Huron chief, and he's like listening to Studi basically say like how these white women and this Duncan that they captured like need to like all be killed. And then Daniel Day-Lewis comes in and he like immediately gets like attacked by the villagers.
He also doesn't fight back when they attack him. They just like keep hitting him.
They hit him like in the head pretty hard and cut his like chest.
Yeah, they cut his chest and stuff, but he doesn't fight back. He just gets back up and keeps walking.
He's like super hardcore. He's just like, his head's all bloody. He's like, okay.
Yeah. It's sort of like one of those like, you know, tests of like honor and manhood.
It kind of felt like that. Like it was a little bit of a visual version of that. Like, oh, like he's walking through the coals or whatever in order to get to his goal. Yeah, something like that.
And also it's like maybe he's, you know, establishing some sort of respect with this tribe.
Yeah. I mean, it takes balls to walk into a whole tribe and like have no weapon and be like, okay, I need to like talk to you guys about something. Like, it's hard enough to like when you know people quick. And have to do that. Like, just real quick. I need to talk to you about this little thing over here. But so eventually like negotiates and calls Magua out and basically says, listen to this guy. He sounds like he's French. Like all he wants to do is like collect furs and money and trade people and all this shitty stuff that has none of your tribe's values. Like
those are the ways of the Yankees and the French traders. Like, you know, would you become like infected with greed basically? And
it's like,
and Magua says yes, like I would take up their ways.
Which is then the Huron leader's like, or the chief is like, yeah, okay, this guy's full of shit. Like, so he basically says like, okay, then take Cora, go burn her, and then take the young one,
take her as your wife,
and then Duncan can leave to appease the British general so they don't come attack them. And then Daniel Day-Lewis is like, wait, we need to change the terms. What if
he says like trade me for her, like my life for
he can't
hers.
speak Huron or French.
Duncan is translating everything that Hawkeye says during this scene.
And so instead of saying like, oh, take Daniel Day-Lewis, he's like, oh, just take me instead.
Take me.
And so they're like, okay. And so they give Cora back to Daniel Day-Lewis. Magua takes off with Alice, the sister. And then they burn Duncan at the stake.
That's, I think, was my favorite part of the movie when I saw it originally, and I think it's still my favorite part of the movie. Just the fact that Duncan like redeems himself. Like he's been kind of a prick the whole movie, but you get all these like subtle character like moments where he's like, you can see he's like, I don't, what should I do here? Not enough to tip you off to make you anticipate that twist where he sacrifices himself, because that moment it's like you don't see it coming at all. It's an arc. It's a kind of hidden because they want it to be a surprise, but I honestly believe that Duncan goes through a transformation from the moment that they start marching him to his death basically to when Hawkeye shows up and has this like I'm gonna offer myself moment where Duncan finally realizes like, oh, I'm the asshole. Like, this guy is fucking awesome. And, like, I have been such a dick this whole movie. I'm not going to let this great person die. I'll sacrifice myself.
Right.
Remember I told you the one scene in Always that made me cry was the bus driver?
Mm-hmm.
This moment in this movie always gets me choked up, too, because it's, like, the sacrificial moment of, like, it's that, like, that character that you didn't expect anything from, who like rises to the occasion. And I don't know. I fucking love it. I love it so much.
He's definitely like doing the right thing. And I agree with you there, but I didn't get that. I didn't get that vibe from it at all. Like what you saw in it is, and then that's what's great about this is like that you can see something completely different than what I see. Like I see him as like this kind of like idiot where he's like, I don't really, he's like thinking he did the right thing. He's like, oh, look at me. Like, I'm a big shot too. Like, that's the vibe I got from him. Like, oh, wait, let me sacrifice myself and then I'll have the glory or whatever. And then that kind of echoes back to what his father said about like, not all deaths are honorable or whatever. Like,
oh,
I don't know. It just like, because here's the thing too. Like,
I don't know. I think
Daniel Day-Lewis even goes one, and what I mentioned earlier with the mercy shot is like, he like looks back and like, his street smarts are even so good that he's like, oh, they're gonna like burn him, and so he just goes back with his rifle and then kills Duncan while he's burning alive to like mercy kill.
I'll say this, and it's not trying to invalidate your opinion of it at all, but like, because intention on the part of the filmmakers doesn't necessarily mean anything, but there was one thing in something that I read or watched where they were talking about that moment. And I guess originally it was supposed to be a much faster, like he pulls the gun and just shoots him. But they changed it because they were like, no, like he should be showing respect to him. And it should be a much slower, methodical aiming and making sure that he kills him like first shot.
What if they cut the burning, like the preparation of the pyre or whatever, like with like Daniel Day-Lewis, like slowly like bringing up the gun? That I think that might have like made it more dramatic for me. It was dramatic, but it was like,
I feel like they do. I don't know. Yeah.
It's from a far away, and I feel like they never showed like him like getting like roped up or any of that stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, they show him go up, but there's a weird filter on the image, so it's like blurred at the edges. It's because they were under the budgetary constraints of like, well, we can't actually show him being burned, so we'll just like blur the edges of the frame so it looks like heat blur, kind of
something like that. Yeah,
I think that's the effect they're going for.
So now we're approaching the end.
Yeah.
I have a note that's called like the tunnel of sadness, because as sad things happen, like our heroes like come out like one by one from this like trail and then like witness their like loved ones being murdered like in front of them, and it's like, it's almost like, okay, now it's your turn. Oh no. Okay, now it's your turn. Oh no. And so
Yeah, no, that
it's-
is true.
what happens is Wes Studi and his like band of like maybe 10 Huron warriors are walking with Alice, and they're on this narrow trail on a cliffside.
Yeah.
Another beautiful shot, looks really nice. And the music's playing, and it's like this Irish, not jig, what is it? Like some sort of like epic music, but it feels Irish.
It's a contemporary Irish singer-songwriter who made some instrumental track. They took that, well, it doesn't actually appear in the movie, but they took it and they split up all the components of it, like the harmony, the melody, the violin part, like all that stuff was in it, but they like took it apart and developed each part into like their own individual pieces.
Wow, really?
And then at that moment, at the end, the part that we're talking about where everyone's like going up this cliffside, all the different components of the score start being like introduced and layered upon each other. So it's like everything that you heard throughout the movie separately is being built and built and built, and you're realizing that it's all one piece, and it's kind of like reflecting of all the different themes in the movie all coming together at once. It's really cool. It's brilliant. It's the music in this movie is fucking awesome.
It's really good. You should put the soundtrack on if you're driving.
Yeah,
I didn't watch this movie when I was younger. It didn't like, there was nothing that stuck with me or anything like that. But now watching it as an adult is like awesome.
My mom loves this movie.
Nice.
I told her that we were going to do this episode, and she was like, "You better be nice to my movie." She had the soundtrack on CD, and I remember we used to listen to it in the car all the time.
Oh yeah, I mean,
yeah,
totally. So everyone dies. Not
so
really.
Everyone dies. It's Hawkeye and Chingachgook and Uncas and Cora pursuing Magua and Alice and his band.
But
of
first,
Hurons,
it's just Uncas who like takes off
because he wants to rescue Alice because he's in love with her,
which is
shakily established.
Yeah, we're not really sure why, but he's like, I'm gonna kill Magua, so you can kind of buy that part. So it's great. He takes out the first couple of warriors, gets to Magua, they fight. Magua kills him,
fucks him up,
falls off the cliff, and then
it's sad. I mean, it's sad. Like,
but it's all set to this music,
death.
And it's like, it's like hardcore, like, you know,
well, you like
hand-to-hand
slits
fighting.
his throat, and you see it's like close up of both of them, and you just see like blood splatter on Uncas's face, and it's like, oh god,
yeah,
it's brutal.
It's brutal, and then
he just throws him off the edge of the cliff.
Alice is watching this.
Alice steps to the edge
of the cliff because she's like looking at these people like, oh my god, what are they gonna do to me?
And this is another moment in the movie that I love. I feel like all the moments that I love in this movie are all about like characters' humanity coming through. But Magua, it's a very specific shot. He's got the knife, and then it's just, you just see his hand and the knife, and it goes down to his side, and he holds out his hand to her, and he's like, come back from the edge. And Mann even talks about it in the commentary. He's like, this is like Magua's repressed humanity from like the brutality that he's experienced and like what he's been forced to become. It's like who he really is shining through for just a brief moment. Like, don't jump off the edge of the cliff. Like, come back.
To jump back, when he's speaking to the French general, he definitely says like, I was enslaved and I was brother to the Mohican, like long ago.
And they murdered his like wife and children and stuff like that. Like that's why he wants to kill the gray hair.
So
he's responsible.
He holds all these people responsible for what happened to him. But yeah, so I could see that there's a little glimmer of his humanity coming back, of maybe who he was prior to all that bad stuff happening to him.
Yeah.
Anyway, she decides
she's
to
like,
not
fuck
listen to
that.
him and like jumps off the cliff. And then like just as she's doing that, like then like her sister comes out of the tunnel, and then so it's just like, oh, and then so now they're like, we're all sad, but the dad is like, fucking, I hate this guy. Then Danny Day-Lewis is like freaking out. And he does this awesome
shoots two guys at
dual
once.
muskets, and he's like,
He shoots the two guys to cover for his dad, and then he drops his muskets and picks up their muskets and
continues running, like dual musketing. I mean, these guns are like 6 feet long too, right? So now it's the final battle.
We get to the ultimate final battle,
and it's
the boss battle.
It's not Daniel Day-Lewis and Magua. It's Chingachgook and Magua.
Yeah, he fucking ruins Magua.
Yeah, like pretty brutally. Like hits him in a couple key spots, and he's like all dazed.
Mann talks about it in the commentary. He says that like the movie has many conflicts and crisis, all rolling into one ultimate one, which is, what are all indigenous people to do? We are facing the end of our existence. What are we to do? Before he kills him, the two, Chingachgook, the Mohican, and Magua, the Huron, look at each other, and in that gaze is the whole of the content. There is no answer. It's a horrible, tragic conflict for which there is no solution.
It really is. It's not anticlimactic. There is a climax, but it's there's no resolution,
tragic.
Right? Yeah, it's tragedy. Yeah, and then there's no like wedding scene or anything with like Daniel Day-Lewis or like what they go to do. It's just implied that I guess things are
they're gonna go on. Yeah, I mean that's what they say. Like they're standing on the edge and they're looking out over the cliff, and it's like, well, they're gonna move. The frontier is gonna move past this point in time, which it does, you know.
Absolutely.
They'll probably have children who grow up and like have their own lives and stuff. And
so that was Last of the Mohicans.
Fucking Last of the Mohicans. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a really good movie.
I love this fucking movie. I loved it growing up. I love it even more now. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Or if you have, you should watch it again.
And also, if you like this content, please share, like, and subscribe.
Yeah. Yes. Also starring on Instagram now.
And we have Spotify if you would like to listen to an audio only version of this.
I think, we're going to go entire thing audio, and then we'll do like a shorter version on the video. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time for another Daniel Day-Lewis high
what's
octane.
Next? What are we doing next? There Will Be Blood?
We're doing There Will Be Blood!
Ah!
We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening. I'm Dan.
I'm Morgan.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Well, you might recognize someone here tonight. Some thespian also starring in a movie that you like. The face of